Excellent. Well, it looks like we're filling up pretty quick. So I'm going to get started. My name is Austin. I'm the VP of Audit Solutions here at UAttest. We're really excited to be talking today about securing your SAML and SSO after the SolarWinds attack. We're joined with a fantastic group of panelists. We have Mark Lambiase, founder of Live Free or Die Software, David Barish, Senior Solution Engineer at Octa, Kelly Gilmore, Senior Vice President of Information Security at Commerce Home Mortgage. We're really thrilled to be having this panel of experts on here today. They're going to be answering your questions. A couple other voices you're going to be hearing. We have Garrett Grajek, CEO of UAttest, as well as Mark Millar, Director of Engineering at UAttest. Really quick, I'd just like to go over the agenda. So we are going to be starting out with Mark Lambiase talking about the SolarWinds attack, specifically what is it. Next, Garrett's going to talk about SAML and why does it matter for single sign-on. Then he's going to pass it back on over to Mark and talk about how SolarWinds attack affected SAML. Then Kelly is going to talk about how to defend your SAML against attacks. Next, Mark Millar will jump in and he's going to talk about how UAttest protects on the server side of things. And then we're going to be over to Garrett and myself, just going over how UAttest helps protect against these accounts and really defending privilege escalation. I'll run a quick demo going over that. Finally, please hold on to your questions. We will be having all of our panelists available to answer them for about 10 minutes on here, 15. And we're going to be able to get to those. So type those in, have them come on in, but we'll get to those at the very end of the presentation. So thanks so much for joining us. With that, I'm going to pass on over to Mark. Thanks, Mark.
So the SolarWinds attack, what is it? First of all, SolarWinds is what would be considered a high value target. It's a command and control system. It's a monitoring system that enterprises deploy. And in order to monitor a number of different aspects of the systems that an enterprise wants to watch, not just servers, but also routers, switches, et cetera, it has to have credentials to be able to access into those. So if you're able to compromise one of these internal SolarWinds servers, you can also find yourself able to access or visualize the network topology of the enterprise and pivot around and do other things. So the actual attack was fairly sophisticated. We haven't seen a lot of supply chain attacks where maliciously crafted code is injected into the software lifecycle. By doing this, the malicious code was actually signed so that it looked completely legitimate to any kind of customer. And if this malicious code were installed by the administrator, if it was activated inside of the SolarWinds Orion platform, it would start reaching out to a command and control server, which has been identified. And after that initial reach to the command and control server, it may grab other names that it starts reaching out to either install other software or start transmitting information back out that it's been able to glean from that initial breach. Now, once they're in, they want to start getting deeper. So they pivot over, and what was happening here, it seems one of the primary goals was to pivot over to Windows administrator credentials, domain administrator credentials. And it appears that in some case they were also creating their own credentials, not necessarily with administrative access, but it could have been. So creation of new credentials that gave them access and grabbing that administrative access. Now, once you have administrative access into the domain, the pivot that really is apparently at the heart of this whole compromise is lifting cryptographic credentials off of those domain controllers. And these cryptographic credentials, the X509 certificates, these asymmetric keys, that private key is something that we've always been concerned about, especially when it was stored in software, which it typically is. But the big danger here is that these certificates were being used to sign Saml certificates, Saml tokens. And stealing that Saml signing certificate meant that these attackers were able to generate legitimate looking and useful Saml tokens. So Garrett, why don't you describe what Saml is for us to give us a stronger foundation of how this attack becomes so dangerous?
Fantastic. And first of all, team out there, you got questions, we got answers. This is the panel. Some people maybe read an article about Saml, some people live it. Let's start with David Barish, who's now at Octa. Me and him worked together in Integrity. That basically invented Saml. There was something called S2L back then. Kelly and Mark weren't part of a company that built a Saml product. They built it. They argued, they fought, they scraped, they collided, they put it together and served hundreds of them. So we got the team for you today, okay? Okay, let's talk about Saml. I love Saml. I love the concept of IDP, SP, all that. Always been in love with it. Been led 20 years of my life. It is a very simple concept. It's basically saying, I have a trust here, and I'm going to send you something digitally signed, and you're going to trust it. What's the big deal about that? You don't have to sign it again. You don't have to use more passwords, what we all hate, etc. As discussed, original version came from a company called Integrity. David and I worked as SCs, greatest job in the world, and then was taken over in a good way, was asked to be taken over and handed over to the Oasis group. Next. Okay, really important for this discussion, especially when you start listening to Kelly and Mark talk about hacks and what happened here. And we're going to talk a little about the protocol. Identity provider. Identity provider is you, the customer. You're the identity provider. Now, there's really good stuff going on in the last 10 years about the identity provider, right? That maybe you shouldn't have let David talk about that probably later. Maybe you shouldn't even be holding all the data, right? But the identity provider is where your data is. The service provider is your destination, right? What do you want? I want Salesforce. I want Concur. I want Workday. I want Google. I want Microsoft. Okay. The whole concept is if you set up an IDP correctly, that's your one target that has the credentials, and then you don't pass the password all over the place. That's what Saml's about, right? It's brilliant. It's correct. It's the way we want to do it. Let's just deploy it correctly. But let's talk a little more about it. Next slide. Okay, and I could have gone to anyone's diagram. I chose, what is a secret double octopus? It's the same configuration. That's the whole idea of Oasis and Saml, is that it's agreed upon protocol and we all can use it. I like personally SP initiated logon, which is you go to the service provider first. Go to the service provider, user attempts to get the resource there, and then you get redirected. Redirected is what it is, not directed, redirected into the IDP. Why is that good? Because abstraction is good. Now I'm at the IDP. Octa, who I work a lot with, is brilliantly glommed onto the concept of zero trust, right? I just built a product at a company that said, okay, if I'm getting redirected to the IDP, what's my zero trust? What's my security posture? Should I be re-authenticated? Should I even be trusted? What is the protocol of that? IDPs can handle all that, okay? If they're well constructed, and Octa, of course, is ludicrously well constructed. Once that they do the authentication and then they pass the trust over to the SP. How do you pass trust? You pass the trust via one of the protocols is Saml. Next. Okay, just for the sake of it, I wanted to show the team out there what a Saml packet looks like. If that looks like XML, that's because it is. Okay, and as that looks like a certificate there, and that is all crossed out to make sure that the hackers out there don't just start using it, which is what the target was. That's because it is. That's all SAML is. It's an agreed upon protocol of XML digitally signed. Next. And last to remember, people, and this is the point of why I got this wonderful team together on Sunday, and they responded, so I greatly appreciated, to get this message out. SAML's not broken. I repeat, SAML's not broken. They did not break the protocol. This is not like some, big, thing that we're all going to say blockchain's broken, Bitcoin's no good. No, and we're not saying that. SAML's not broken. How you deploy it, how it's deployed, how you store your users, how you store the credentials, how you manage your admin accounts, that's what we have to talk about. And that's what we will be talking about. Okay, take it away. Back to Mark.
So the SolarWinds attack, how does it affect SAML and SSO? Well, as Garrett was just describing, SAML allows for an end user to grab a ticket that will demonstrate that they have authenticated. And that ticket is going to let them go and access other applications. So by stealing the cryptographic credentials, you're able to create forged tickets. And this is huge. This is a really big problem because in many ways, these tickets look completely legitimate, especially the fact that using an asymmetric key set, they are legitimately signed. Now, when you set up SAML, okay, you keep your private key and you put your public key up at that application. That's how it's able to see. And that private key is supposed to always stay private. Well, once you have the ability to create forged tickets, you can craft these tickets for any account, including administrator accounts or user accounts. It could be the CEO's account. It could be the general counsel. It could be an accountant, a developer, a salesperson. And these SAML tokens are not just used for internal accounts. They're used for your external accounts, which means that these attackers can impersonate you, your boss's boss, the guy that signs the paychecks, the guy who transfers money up in Salesforce, out at the bank, over in the G Suite, or at Office 365. So with the move into cloud services, which is a fantastic opportunity for IT to adopt sophisticated resources without the complete burden of maintenance and deployment. Okay, we're able, our enterprises are able to leverage these phenomenal services like a Salesforce or G Suite or Office 365, but they don't have to create and manage all of these different user stores. So what does this mean? If you were compromised through the SolarWinds attack and they did get your SAML signing certificate, then they could be anybody in any of your services. And that's just hugely dangerous in so many different ways. These guys are reading at your mail, they're looking at your customer list, they're taking your intellectual property. So back to you, Garrett.
Fantastic. This is going to Kelly.
Thanks, Garrett.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does this mean, right? What are we looking for? How do we identify this type of attack? For starters, I think it needs to be said that if you've identified that your organization has these affected binaries from SolarWinds Orion, if those are present in your environment, you should definitely consider disabling SolarWinds and isolating those servers. I think most people have read about this, but I think it's important to say that isolating these servers, taking SolarWinds out, rebuilding SolarWinds is generally what's being suggested by experts in the industry, and I include myself in that. I would definitely recommend that. Do consider one thing though, just for sanity's sake. If you do have those systems running, or had those systems running, hang on to them. Make sure that you can get a forensic image of it should you need to go back and have those looked at down the road. So just wanted to get that out of the way. Anyhow, there are a lot of potential indicators of compromise to look at. I've listed a few here, which, there's some here, there's some in the next section actually coming up. But for starters, I want to also say that in large environments, you might need to identify if SolarWinds is in your environment. There's actually some of the domains that SolarWinds uses. You can actually look for those DNS lookups for those to help you identify if some rogue department in your company is using SolarWinds and you don't know about it. Large organizations, I've seen stranger things happen. So just to make sure you know that what you've got, I would recommend digging in a little bit deeper there. Second off, command and control. You want to look for command and control communications. Those can be found by searching gateway, firewall logs. If you have a SIM, hopefully you do, or other network device logs. You want to look for communications that communicate with the domains and IP addresses of this attack. And those IP addresses and domains are pretty well documented in the CISA, FireEye, or whatever your preferred security vendor reports are. I think I saw at least 10 over the last few days. The most widely used domain, of course, is that avsvmcloud.com. But I've also seen up to 12 other domains, which might be communications may be occurring with. So the real point of this is to look for those types of communications, including DNS lookups to those domains, because that is an attack vector and a good indicator that there is something going on in your environment. With respect to Saml specifically, there's a couple of things with Saml, as well as applications that use Saml quite often, such as Office 365 or Octa. Impossible logins or impossible travel. Those are two of the primary ones to be looking for. When an adversary is using a complex network of IPs, they do that, of course, to obscure their activity, and that, of course, can be tracked through authentication logging. And when that IP address, as far as geographically, is too far apart, for instance, 500 miles in a 5-minute period, that's a decent indicator of possible compromise. You need to investigate it further to make sure that you're not dealing with a VPN, a legitimate VPN communication or traffic, but you should definitely look there. The second of that is what's called an impossible token, and that really falls back to the Saml's assertion itself, the token itself, which Garrett showed earlier. And two or three of the things you want to look for there is the validity period. Generally speaking, with like an Octa or even ADFS, the validity period for a Saml token is generally an hour. Some Some companies go larger. It's not recommended if you're following best practices, of course. But if you have a Saml token with a validity period of 24 hours, which is not normal for your environment, that's a pretty good indicator that perhaps your token has, or your certificate, signing certificate has been compromised. Timestamps, that's another good indicator. There's actually a lot of good information out on the internet about this. But if the token was issued and used at the same time, that would be a very good indicator of compromise, an automated attack, because a user won't be able to do that quickly. Again, in that token, if you're reviewing those types of assertions themselves, if you don't see an associated login with that account, an account with that is also another good indicator of a possible attack. So you definitely would want to dig in and investigate that further. So there are others. You know your environment best, and you know what options there are for the type of monitoring and the logs you're collecting, and but consider it incredibly important to look for abnormalities in your communication, whether it's DNS or other communications out for SAML or OAuth authentication. It's just make sure that you are looking for abnormalities in all of your authentication. So let's move on to the next slide there, Austin. Thank you. So how to defend against this attack? This attack is of course, it starts with the Orion compromise, which gets an attacker into your environment. Once an attacker's in your environment, it's just a matter of time before they get where they want to go. So what you want to try to do is defend, and these here come from multiple different references, different resources that I have found. They follow good practices, but these are a few of the components of an overall security program, and should be considered a starting point, not the end all be all. This attack gets the bad actor into your environment, as I said, and from there, it's actually just like other types of attack. This specifically one, MITRE attack. So the goal of this section here is, make it harder to compromise your environment. That gives you time to react and respond. So as far as defenses against this attack, that's our main goal. So antivirus, EDR, that's a big topic there, of course, for all of your endpoints. We want to block command and control. We want to make sure that our IDP, our federation technologies, keys are all secured. As far as admin accounts, best practices, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Monitoring accounts, account usage, that type of thing. And then, of course, we want to try to reduce our attack surface. So move on to the next slide there. We'll talk a little bit about antivirus. So with antivirus, the goal of that, of course, is to identify and block execution of the compromised binaries, and if possible, identify any malicious activity, block it from accounts or devices. And that's the obvious goal. That's what antivirus is intended to do, right? In this particular case, you really need to make sure that you're running the most up-to-date antivirus, and preferably an EDR product. Whatever the EDR product of choice is, contact your EDR vendor. Look for some guidance from them. They may be putting together or have put together specific policies or other updates to their product to help you identify malicious activity, those binaries, making sure that scanning is occurring and is successful in identifying where those binaries may be and block that execution of those binaries. All in all, you want to leverage, any opportunity, any threat intelligence, and your EDR to monitor for any new indicators of compromise. Because the truth is, we know some of the vectors. They have not. CISA, FireEye, they have stated they believe they know the 2 of the vectors or more, but as Mark and said earlier, once they're in, it's possible things could go in many different directions. Let's move on to the next question or topic. So the goal of this one, of course, blocking command and control endpoints. We want to stop remote command and control communications to those remote networks and to limit that activity so that it can't pull information, pull commands out from those command and control endpoints, which can, of course, deliver different payloads, such as ransomware, anything along those lines, or any other new attack vector. If you can stop that communication, you're doing a good block to limit what can happen in your environment. Again, we need to search gateway, firewall, your SIM for these types of communications. Those command and control domains are pretty well detailed in this CISA and FireEye. I think McAfee also has a pretty good list on their site as well. But obviously, you want to block these at your firewalls or proxies, any control point that you have available to you. We're actually looking into the Windows 10 firewalls, personal devices with group policy to apply those as well. So whatever's at your disposal, consider blocking those IPs and domains as best you can. Next slide. All right. So Mark touched upon this a little bit ago. Protect the Saml signing token certificate from compromise to stop impersonation attacks. Mark covered that pretty well, but from what we have to do to defend here is we have to follow the best practices. If you're using ADFS, there's a very good article, which I have in a reference coming up here in the next slide, that discusses how best to protect ADFS if it's on premise. There's also Octa, other providers out there also have other best practices. Look those documents up, find out where you are, and then make the necessary changes, updates to apply those. Consider protecting your signing keys with hardware security module. That's hardware security modules have been around for a very long time. If you're going to make an investment to protect authentication, an HSM is a great place to start. Other things, of course, if you've got on-prem ADFS, there's a great, as I said, there's a great document on Federation services that provide that. That also includes key rotation and MFA, adding MFA to your ADFS. And there are specific hardware security modules that do work with ADFS, and it's very well documented by Microsoft. Key rotation is probably one of the important parts. ADFS rotates keys automatically. I believe it's every year. I would recommend that be changed in your environment, but you have to do what works best for you and balance the overhead that might be involved with that, because your service providers, if you're If you change the certificate on your identity provider side and then your service provider doesn't automatically update, well, you have to manually go in and fix that. So there's a caveat to that. But you definitely need to consider key rotation for keeping the keeping those authentications secure. Next slide, please. So you need to ensure your admin and service accounts follow security best practices. I kind of bunched together admin and service accounts because both of those are high value targets for this attack in particular. If you can protect those, you have a better chance, of course, of protecting your SAML signing token from compromise. The best solutions for that, of course, are use long random generated passwords. If you can use a security certificate or a security device like a YubiKey or that type of device, those are very highly recommended. You should consider the just-in-time and just-enough administration, strong authentication management for Active Directory. Those are two very important pieces. If you can limit or control where administrative tasks are coming from, it's easier to protect them, especially for your critical infrastructure servers. That's a very good method for protecting that. The other piece to that, of course, is you need to audit all privileged accounts. We don't, as an industry, I don't think we do that nearly enough. There's, of course, privilege access management solutions out there. Highly recommend looking into those if you're not using them right now. Of course, UATest is a fantastic solution and helps us out greatly in that space. We need to reduce the number of users that are members of those highly privileged roles, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. Global admins in Azure, domain and enterprise admins within an on-prem Active Directory. You always want to follow with these the principle of least privilege. And if you can, look into zero trust. Zero trust principles are key in the area of protecting these accounts. Next slide, please. So you want to reduce your attack surface. This is a broad topic. I've only listed a few here. There's many ways to remediate and mitigate weaknesses in your environment. The one important thing is do not focus solely and only on your high value targets. One of the interesting parts of this attack is as the attacker gets into your environment, they may only compromise just a user account, and through that access, they have the capability of privilege escalation. That's the goal. As they they move laterally through your environment. So your high value targets, your domain admin accounts, your other types of accounts, you really can't focus solely on those. You have to try to protect, unfortunately, all of your accounts in the best way you can. So other things you can do, of course, are remove unnecessary applications, any application weaknesses, of course, any vulnerabilities. You have to make sure that if you find any compromised credentials, that those are immediately disabled. Patching. That is another key method to reducing your attack surface. If your endpoints, servers, even your devices, firmwares, if they are not up to date and patched against these vulnerabilities, it's very likely that one of those vulnerabilities could be taken advantage of, and that would be a pathway to compromise. Next slide, please. So here's a set of references of many of the great documents that are out there. I won't go into the detail here, but we could provide those if necessary, if you need them. There's a lot of great material out there. I highly recommend looking into these topics specific to your environment, what you have at your disposal in those areas. Thank you.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks a lot, Kelly. What I'm going to do is introduce now Mike Millar, who's the infrastructure manager for UATest. And what's relevant here is what we had to do is Mark Lambiasi went and told us about the attack. I told a little about Saml. Kelly did a great job and said, hey, customer, you want to be your IDP, you want to do Saml and communicate to these services. What do you have to make sure you're doing? Okay, now I'm going to talk for a few minutes on the SP side. That is the service provider side. And how did they protect? Go for it, Mark Millar.
All right, thanks, Garrett, and thanks, Kelly, and thanks everyone for joining. We certainly appreciate that. So at UATest, we take security very seriously. We make sure that our servers are secure, our code is secure, and even the way that we operate on day-to-day basis, everything is secure. So if I talk about security at the server level, we are hosting our servers in AWS, which all those data centers are, ISO 27001 compliant, PCI, HIPAA, and all those compliances. So they're very secure data centers. We are leveraging encryption at rest and in flight. When I talk about encryption at rest, that means we are using encrypted storage, and also we are doing a database level encryption for all keys and secure information and or sensitive information in our database. Other than that, we leverage SSL encryption for in-flight, and that is true for all communication with our UATest application, our communication with our backend APIs, or if you are using a single sign-on with Octa, all that process will be SSL encrypted as well. And then as far as our coding is concerned, we are leveraging Octa user store for user management. What that means is that when you go to console.uatest.com and register an account and you enter your save your password and all those details, we do not save that sensitive information in our database. We in the backend, we are leveraging Octa's user store. So all the security features that Octa has built over years, we basically leverage all those features and functionality and secure that information on their data stores. If I talk more about our AWS infrastructure, by default on the firewall level, everything is blocked by default. And we only open or allow traffic whichever is necessary. And by default, no outbound traffic is allowed other than 443, which is HTTPS. And we also have alerts and logs in place. So anytime we see some malicious activity, our security team will get notification right away. And on top of that, all the things that Kelly mentioned, like patch management and antivirus, we are also leveraging those technologies on the server side as well. And if I talk about our code, we do go through vulnerability scans and all penetration tests, and we have a lot of mechanisms to prevent man-in-the-middle attack. If I talk about Saml Tokens, for single sign-on, we are using Octa. So we are using Octa's best practices as far as token refresh and other things are concerned. And for our API communication with, our front-end communication with APIs, we are leveraging token refresh mechanism that token expires after every couple minutes, and the application procures a new token after about 120 seconds. So, in a scenario, after all these security implementations we have, even if someone gets that token, it will refresh after a couple minutes. So they can't do much with it. And finally, on the operation side, we always recommend our customers to leverage least privilege principle for granting access to UATest. What that means is that when they are creating tokens to be used in UATest, they don't really have to give full super administrator privileges to UATest. They can create this token if they just want to leverage your task for creating, running these audits, generating reports, and not making changes inside Octa directly. Customers can generate tokens with read-only access. If they want to have, some more, if they want to use our advanced features where we can make changes, whether it's changes in the group assignments or changes in the application assignments, the Octa administrators can limit that access only give that token access to those specific groups and application, not the entire Octa suite. So that's what we recommend to our customers as well. So there are different layers of security, that we have implemented, like I said, at the server level, at the core level, and on the operation side as well. And that being said, I will go back to Garrett.
Thanks. And one thing I have to say about addressing these problems, the greatest phrase I heard about this is calm is contagious. Listen to both Kelly and then Mark M, right? They're handling this. It's about preparing. It's about doing the due diligence beforehand. Running around afterwards like my kids do when it's finals time is not the way to handle this. And Kelly, you're laughing because you just went through finals with your son the same age, okay? So team, let's talk about a mechanism. Both Kelly, both Mark L and Mark M mentioned POPL, principle of least privilege. We all know we have to do it. We know we should be doing it. Here's the quote from the esteemed Mark Rogers from Octa Security. He wrote a fantastic article 2 days ago. I said it about 3 times in the last hour about what we should be doing to make sure that we protect this single sign-on at us level, at the customer level. Microsoft has a quote like that as well. Okay, easier said than done, right? Because I know I'm that guy I'm not calm. I would go to Kelly, I'd go to Mark and say, make this change, make this change, make this change. I got to give this guy access. I got to give that. That's why now that I'm on the governance side of the world, we created this. Next. We created a trigger system that goes right into Octa UD or via Octa's UD agent into AD when the changes occur in those key groups. Everyone, Octa, Microsoft, Kelly, Mark M, all stated that we should be watching the admin accounts, the PAM accounts, the service accounts. If those are altered, which the hack did, right? And most hacks do, because no one just wants to steal Garrett's information. They want to steal the access that Kelly and Mark have to because they have the keys to the kingdom and they can start pulling our PII and PHI, okay? Therefore, we, the product builder, should not only give you the ability to do the administration, but governance. There should be watching eyes that watch changes in those groups. And that's exactly what UATest triggers are, okay? Next. Yeah, so that's what our triggers do. We watch the UD on Octa side, and if you're connected to AD, fine. We use the Octa connector to pull information from there, and then we let you set up which accounts you want to look at. And we all know from this dialogue, you should be watching the PAM accounts, the service accounts, the administration accounts, and then who should review. That's a whole nother webinar, but we always say that the systems and the business user should both review. You can do that in UATest. So for the sake of demo, which I love, and I think it helps, go ahead, Austin.
Perfect, sounds good. I'm gonna jump screens over to our demo really quick. But as Garrett was talking about, one thing we are gonna be showing is the ability to capture changes. That's really important for us to be able to notify the right person so then they can see if someone's trying to escalate their privileges. Going into UATest, what we're gonna do to make this possible is go into our event triggers and we're gonna create triggers. Now, if you're familiar with Octa, what we're doing is we're creating an event trigger just like you would an event hook inside of Octa. we're going to create this for a specific group to monitor when someone is added to this group. So I'm just naming it. I'm selecting the Octa integration. And now under the condition, since we want to monitor a group, I'm going to select group events right here. Next, I want to see if a user is added to this group so we can see if someone's trying to escalate their privileges. Now I'm going to specify the group. We mentioned in the title, domain admins, so we're going to select that. Once we've done this, what we're going to do is make sure that not just this trigger is made, but that someone's notified to this and that we're actually capturing the changes and someone is reviewing that these changes happen. So we're going to select, we want this to be assigned to a user, and we'll just select which user we want. So now what's happening is we're creating a trigger system when someone is added to a group, and then we're assigning a campaign where that is going to be notified to that individual that we have assigned this to. And so what this will look like inside of Octa, if we go in here, I'm going to go over to our workflow event hooks, and you can see under our event hooks, we have added this one right here. Going inside of Octa, when we go over to our actual groups and we set off this trigger, we'll see what happens inside of UATest. So we added this one right here, and we want to add someone to the group. So let's find a user. I'll add share. Just click over, have them added, and then I'm going to click save. So now what's happening in the background, and it just take a couple minutes, but what we've set up is the ability to run an access review. And so we are going to be capturing that change that just took place, the person added to that group, and it's going to be assigned to the specific user we outlined when I set up the rules. You can see right here, these are just some past triggers we've set up. And more importantly, we even have examples of event logs that are taking place. So over time, we're able to capture all the logs, all the times the trigger was set off. But more importantly, we could see who saw that and what their action was throughout the process. So it's fairly straightforward, pretty simple process of actually setting these up, making sure you're monitoring your change controls, and making sure that if someone is being added to a group, if someone's trying to escalate their privilege, you will be able to capture that no problem at all. I know that we're running short on time, so I want to open this up to questions and make sure that we get those in. I see them filing in, so I'm going to jump on over to that. Feel free to type in those questions as we go along. If you'd like to see an expanded demo, I'm more than happy to offer that. But let's go to these right now.
Let's go to the questions, and this is the fun part. And team, thanks for staying on and relevant information. We always just ask, and I saw a bunch of asked questions. We'll share the prezos and we'll get the recording up on YouTube, and I even think Bright Talk. Go for it.
Excellent. Yeah, so our first question, pretty straightforward, and it's asking, do you think that this attack was preventable? Mark, do you think you'd be able to handle that one?
Absolutely. If people had implemented the security strategies that we were describing as far back as 2006, they would have either A, not have been vulnerable, or B, they would have detected these attacks much earlier on. It seems insane that command and control systems for an enterprise, our domain controllers, SolarWinds, tools like that, have unfettered access to the internet today. Even back then, we knew that domain controllers and systems like SolarWinds should have very limited access to the internet, if any at all. Of course, that made administrative tasks like software updates less convenient, so many organizations or administrators did not adopt those recommendations. In modern environments, there is legitimate traffic to the internet, such as from a domain controller to the Azure cloud. But basic packet filters from 1999 could have provided that level of security. Also, back then, IDS was just taking root and IPS was just on its way. We knew that we could not watch all of the traffic on a network or even on a DMZ. Trying to span that on a switch to a promiscuous monitor it would have crushed the backplane. But even back then, we had the capabilities to monitor key servers, model legitimate traffic, and detect anomalous traffic. Same thing with configuration changes. Okay, there's an old tool called Tripwire that was monitoring for configuration and account changes. Okay, you have opportunities to use much more sophisticated tools like UAttest now for much more sophisticated protocols like SAML and protecting these access environments. Additionally, okay, at our time together in SecureAuth, one of our key concerns was protecting keys in software. Hardware security modules could place those private keys outside the grasp of administrator or root access, but adoption of those technologies has been low due to cost.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark. We got another one, and it says, what does Octa recommend why does Octa recommend moving to a cloud-based security model? David, you mind taking this one?
No, I'm happy to take that. So I think what's really been driven home with this SolarWinds attack is that zero trust is not just a buzzword. So when you look at reducing your attack surface and reducing the number of attack points, if your internal environment that you thought was safe but is proven again and again to not be safe, if that can be compromised, you want to limit the number of things they can do on that compromise. And if issuing application credentials, Saml tokens to all of your enterprise applications is one of the things that they can do, you obviously want to reduce the number of places that they can do that. By centralizing that access in Octa, if you're building a cloud-based security model, that's zero trust first. It's always assuming that people should not be allowed in. It is a cloud-based security model. And then you've reduced those number of things that can happen when the inevitable happens, when a SolarWinds attack happens, and everything that you thought was safe in your on-premise environment is no longer safe. So we are looking and we are seeing a lot more centralization so that you are reducing the number of things that can happen when the inevitable happens and there is a compromise.
Thanks, David. Next we have, what do you think the biggest mover in security will be by enterprises based on the attack? And then they follow with key storage improvements, ? So Kelly, I think best for you, and Mark, definitely feel free to chime in on that.
So how about if I jump in first, and Kelly, you follow up, because just being the security geek, the key management is something that I think people are going to start taking a look at. And I think key hardware security modules are going to get a fresh look from the industry. They were considered pricey. Kelly talked about key rotation, which is an incredibly vital task. The problem is that it can either be labor intensive or homegrown, and homegrown can sometimes be excellent, but more often than not, let's say it's less than sophisticated. There are tools out there to mitigate the key life problem that can help automate key rotation. But systems that use things like key management and interoperability, they still rely on some first key to provide the identity before they are folded into the key rotation system. So I don't know for sure. I wouldn't necessarily put all my money in the stock on for these hardware security vendors. But I do think it's time for enterprises to take a fresh look at what they offer and how much they would cost their enterprise. Kelly?
Yeah, I agree completely with that, Mark. And I'll go one step further. Products like YubiKey or other certificate-based or token-based authentication add-ons, especially for multi-factor authentication, I think are also an area that could have helped or would have helped in this particular attack, as far as trying to make it more difficult for the attacker to get credentials and then move laterally, especially on your very sensitive accounts. Beyond that, I think some of the other areas to consider are on the DR side. Forced recovery solutions are not all that well known to many, but if you are attacked, and you lose your control of accounts or that type of thing, those, a forced recovery solution may be something that you will wish you have implemented beforehand. So yeah, HSMs, I think there's going to be another good strong look, or there should be a good strong look at that by security centric organizations.
And let me just add and ask Dave a question. So you think something like this, you see people going maybe less being their own IDPs, and then you know, handing over those duties over to something like, well, I don't know, tested like Octa?
Yeah, again, centralization is always going to improve security. If you're keeping an eye on things, and the fewer things you have to keep an eye on, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, that's what I say it. Whereas, guys, I mean, I love Mark and I love Kelly. It's just hard to find these guys, okay? And that's the cool thing about going centralized. Okay, but keep going. Thanks.
We have time for a couple more questions, so I want to get to this one.
Going.
All right, we got
a wrap presents, so keep going.
We got this one, and it's are you seeing a push to use anything other than SAML and WS-Fed for typical end users, browser federations, SSO integrations into SaaS applications? Dave, do you mind taking this one?
Yeah, I don't mind at all. You know, I think it's about bringing the right tool for the job. I think you're going to continue to see primarily SAML for logging into enterprise applications from an end user browser logging into the front end of an application. So yeah, again, mostly SAML, WS-Fed if it's a Microsoft focused environment. The nice thing though is we are seeing additional layers of security and additional standards-based tools being brought to handle other layers of security. So if it is server to server, we are seeing OAuth. If it is single page apps, if it's mobile apps, you can add OpenID Connect. Still try and keep those things central. That is one of the things that Octa can do, is provide a central point to do all of those. But I think we're going to continue to see SAML as primary for front end, and OAuth and OpenID Connect on the back end for things like maybe you're delegating the authentication to from one application to another, or you want an application to be able to do another level of checking. So SAML we use for the front end, but once that user has logged into the application and you want to continue to do authorization checks deeper in the application, bring in OAuth, bring in that right tool in order to continue those multi-level security.
Excellent, sounds good. And then just really quick, Kelly, what is your opinion of the HW key storage?
Well, as I said before, hardware modules, security modules, they give a layer of protection that you can't do at the software layer. Good products like Octa. Well, I'll stop there. But good products like Octa, their key storage is all HSM protected and back in. Large companies, the company I worked for with Garrett and Mark, we protected our root certificate private keys as much as we possibly could with HSM modules. They can be very expensive. They can be somewhat difficult to manage on that scale, but things have improved. The market has changed. There's a lot of options out there for hardware security modules that you can plug into your Active Directory domain controller or your web server or your ADFS server, and it's not hard to manage and provides a layer of protection you just can't do in the software layer.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I'm kind of hearing the culture of revolution is over. E.g., we should stop building our own furnaces. Okay, keep going. Right, Mark? Yeah, you got that. Thanks. Go, Austin.
All right, let's have, this one's for Mark Lambiasi. And so we say, can you explain how a C2 system works and can it be blocked?
Sure. So the C2 system is the command and control system. And what this is how the attacker gets information out or sends commands down into a compromised environment. So one of the things Kelly and I talked about was the first thing that happened when an administrator installed the malicious software on their SolarWinds Orion server is it reached out to this asmvcloud.com domain, and DNS would return a variety of IP addresses, by the way, for that, depending on when and where you looked it up from. And then reaching out to that would all of a sudden, okay, it reaches out. What do you want me to do? That gives the bad guy the control, and it allows them to send the commands. It could have been anything from immediately exfiltrating data, but more likely is what happened is that the initial compromise was in a DLL, a business logic DLL that was installed on the SolarWinds Orion product. Now, we don't know exactly how SolarWinds itself was breached. That really hasn't come out in the public. We have not received an explanation about how a bad guy injected malicious code into the software lifecycle of a highly valued and an aged vendor. SolarWinds, we've been using it since before 2000, probably. It's been around for a very long time. So we don't know how the malicious software necessarily got there, but when it did, it started reaching out. The typical thing, download Metasploit modules, download other attack software, get things on there that allow them to get the account information, scan internal networks, get the data out about the network topology, get the data out about the accounts, get that certificate out, which was, really, it seems, the nirvana of this particular attack.
Perfect. It was we'll do one more question, and Mark, thanks. It's not a hacker discussion if we don't bring up Metasploit, so thank God someone brought that up. Okay, well done. I got my CEH, so I can say that with a upping shoe thrown at me. Austin, one more. This is fun.
All right, perfect. This looks like a good one to end it on. So let's do what if you are pwned? And we could start with Kelly, but I feel like everyone can jump in.
Everyone. Throw in your opinion. What if this happens to you? Go, Kelly. Then we'll go around.
Well, the bad actor did compromise accounts. You got to wonder what are the high value targets and what do you do, right? It's a big topic. It's a big concern because you're not only necessarily talking about Saml, but you might be talking about Kerberos. You might be talking about all of your accounts and the data and that type of thing. So, the question comes to mind. If you're pwned, the question comes to: do I nuke it from orbit, or are there other alternatives? And I've read quite a few. I had my initial thought originally was nuke it from orbit, but in today's world, that's not necessarily always going to be the answer, and I think it depends very much on a couple of things. One, how confident are you in your monitoring ability and your ability to respond to these types of attacks and activity, malicious activity, versus what will it cost me to rebuild my AD infrastructure if you're on an on-prem? So, I mean, that's one aspect of many. So please, anyone else?
Yeah, so my opinion is that if you are compromised, truly compromised by this, it's time to burn your network to the ground. Especially if this is a state-sponsored actor, BIOS viruses, things that could really just be injected in there. I mean, seriously, there are going to be customers out there that need to get rid of iron. Even just rebuilding the operating system won't be safe. One of the things that I've seen a lot of enterprises migrate to or work on migrating to over the last decade is eliminating APTs by burning down their server farm every 24 hours. They literally drop a server, re-image it, and bring it back up. The problem is you can't do that with everything yet. You can't do that with your domain controllers very easily. It would be great if you could, but the problem is that we're going to have remnants of the attack possibly left behind in configurations that could then be picked up by the fresh code. So even as we start to move towards, burning our network to the ground every night, that may be the required solution today. Hopefully, we can work our way towards smarter solutions in the future.
Hey, Mark, I have to let Dave follow up with that. So take it away, Dave.
Yeah, again, about centralizing your security, very easy with a centralized system like Octa to remove access to all of the key applications with just a click or two. So again, centralizing that security, putting secure access maybe within a couple of key groups, just removing access from those groups is something you could do as an immediate action and immediately remove access while you're trying to figure things out.
Yeah, it might be a great time to re-architect your network toward and leverage Octa.
That's what I was going. When I was hearing you say that, what the furnace builder should be doing, I'm like, well, there's a pretty good furnace in the cloud there. All right, guys. Hey, David, Kelly, Mark, and Austin. That was a lot of fun, and that was good. I mean, it's a serious topic, but it is. Serious topics handled by competent people is doable. All right, guys, all the best. And of course, if you have questions about the audit tool at Austin, show us, give us a ping over here at UATest. All the best and happy holidays, y'all.